Hey, welcome back to the Health Rebels podcast. Hey, if you know, I'm Steve Hicks. I'm the anti-fitness fitness coach. I specialize in lasting weight loss and lifelong wellness. And this is the Health Rebels podcast, pushing forth that anti-fitness message and helping deliver realistic recommendations that help you put your best foot forward every day and have health and wellness every day for the rest of your life. Anyway, big long ramble. I do have to admit, I feel fantastic right now. A little background on the podcast show itself. I do these while walking out in nature and enjoy recording them, but I tend to record a few episodes all at once. In the end, if you caught last week's episode, you might notice at the end, a little winded. I walked up a hill and I was talking continuously for like 40 minutes beforehand. It's quite a workout. It's quite a surprising workout. Just go out in the woods, walk up hills and gab like you can't stop talking. It'll test your VO2 max. That is a fact. Anyway, got some recovery. I'm here with part two, a continuation of last week's episode. Last week we talked about how to overcome minor cases of insomnia, focusing on the autonomic nervous system. Today, we are going to do the same thing, except this time we're going to be focusing on the adenosine sleep pressure system. The adenosine sleep pressure system is another one of the sleep systems that regulate your sleep. Now, I know adenosine sleep pressure system is a bit of a mouthful. Just think about this as the urge to sleep, right? Now, adenosine is a chemical in your body. You might remember high school chemistry class or biology class when they talked about ATP. ATP is your body's energy molecule, right? Every function in your body somehow kind of breaks down ATP, uses the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell, blah, blah, blah. I just want you to know, adenosine triphosphate, ATP, adenosine triphosphate, anytime you have some function, the phosphates break off from the adenosine, that gets recirculated in some complex little microbiology. We don't need to know about that, blah, blah, blah. The adenosine, however, once it gets broken off from the triphosphates, once it gets broken off from the phosphate molecules, the adenosine is actually going to travel through your bloodstream and collect in your brain. There are not very many compounds that break that blood-brain barrier, but adenosine is one of them. And as the adenosine accumulates in the brain, once it hits a certain capacity, once it hits a certain threshold, it's going to just start punching your brain. It's going to be tired. It's going to say, hey, we got too much. It's time to shut down the system. We're going to have to take a nap. We're going to have to go to sleep. We need cleanup. And then when your body goes to sleep, then what ends up happening is you get a literal brainwash. There's a increase in your glymphatic system, which is just it's a literal wash for your brain. It washes the toxins and the compounds off your brain so that your brain can be healthy the next day. And the thing that triggers sleep oftentimes is that compound adenosine. When it accumulates, it signals that we need to clean up, and that makes your body want to fall asleep so that it can go into clean mode. Now, there are some things that people do that block the adenosine, right? So if adenosine is what makes us sleepy, makes us tired, makes us want to fall asleep, makes us get that urge to fall asleep, the sleep pressure system makes you tired, makes you want to fall asleep. There are things that people do that block that, right? You've heard about caffeine. Caffeine is a stimulant. It's not much of a stimulant in reality. What it is it's just a blocker of adenosine. Caffeine attaches to the same receptors that adenosine attaches to, and it blocks that signal. So when adenosine is trying to tell your brain that it's time to clean up, it's time to take a nap, caffeine blocks that signal, cuts off the telephone line, doesn't even talk to the brain, doesn't get that message. The brain doesn't realize that you're trying to fall asleep. The brain doesn't realize that it needs to clean itself, right? It never even gets that message, so we never get that urge to fall asleep. Caffeine blocks that signal, and caffeine can last on the adenosine receptors for about 7 hours. So that's going to come up later in the discussion, right? But caffeine is one of those things that blocks the signal to fall asleep. Another thing that kind of blocks that signal is, like I mentioned, every time you start to fall asleep, every time you go to bed, every time you take a nap, your brain is going to wash itself. And as it does that, it will lower the adenosine stores. It'll break down some of the adenosine, it'll wash that away, let it repurpose into ATP, give you more energy throughout the day for the next day. But what that also does is it might bring the adenosine down below the signal threshold. It might clean up enough adenosine that it's not present, that it's not noticed, that it's not signaling the time to clean up signals, right? So we often see this in times when people watch TV in the evenings, they take a nap on the couch, they wake up, they go, ooh, I must need to go to bed. And they walked up into their bedroom and now they can't fall asleep. They had no problem falling asleep on the couch, but now they don't have enough sleep pressure. It's because you lost that by taking an inappropriate nap. You can also do this, I'm sure you've had this experience where for some reason you're just tired in a day. And so you take a nap after work. You take a deliberate nap, wake up a little bit in the evening, late afternoon, and then you struggle to fall asleep that night, right? Ever take a nap a little too late and struggle to fall asleep? It's because of the sleep pressure system. It's because you washed away adenosine too close to sleep time and you no longer have that pressure to fall asleep. You no longer have that sleep pressure. And then finally, the third thing that interrupts your sleep pressure systems is being sedentary, right? Ever since computers radically revolutionized the way people work, our day-to-day habits are grossly sedentary. We are massively under movers. We don't move the body enough. We don't do enough actions to use the ATP. We don't break off adenosine. We don't get those thresholds in the brain because we're not active enough throughout the day, throughout the week. So one of the big recommendations, you've probably seen people talk about, daily steps, right? Trying to get 10,000 steps. Without getting into the weeds about whether that number is right or not, we'll just use that for conversation right now. On average, the average American gets about 3,500 steps a day. That's if they work in an office. If you're working from home, good luck. It's much less, right? During the pandemics, while people were at home doing work from homes, during the isolations and the shutdowns, my clients, when they started with me during the pandemic, we would take their step measurements and they were at like 600 to 1,000 a day, right? If you're working from home, you're probably really sedentary. Unfortunately, we have to counter that with deliberate activity. We have to counter that sometimes with exercise activity, right? If you've ever done some really hard labor, like some gardening or helped somebody move and realized all you wanted to do afterwards was fall asleep, that's because of the adenosine sleep pressure, right? You did a lot of activity, got really tired. That's what happens, right? Normal American lifestyles, no activity throughout the day, very minimal. They, like I said, 3,500 steps compared to the 10,000 average or the 10,000 standard. We really move like half to 1/3 the amount that we should in a day-to-day habits. And that causes a lack of adenosine, that causes us to have a lack of sleep pressure, that causes us to have minor cases of insomnia. So we talked about 3 ways that people mess up their adenosine. What can we do on the opposite side? Well, we can manage our caffeine intake, right? If we know that caffeine takes about 7 hours to break down, 7 hours to get flushed out of the system, 7 hours to reopen the adenosine receptors, then we know that if we have a bedtime, say your bedtime's at 10 o'clock at night, then 7 hours before that, we should be doing a good job of preventing extra caffeine intake. We should be blocking caffeine. We should be minimizing caffeine. We should not be having espressos at 4 p.m. We should not be having giant sodas with dinner, right? Those things that have caffeine in them, we want to try to avoid them 7 hours before bedtime, right? That way, the receptors are open, the adenosine can send signals, and then we can feel that urge to sleep, that sleep pressure when we go to bed. The second thing we can do is we can manage our nap schedules, right? Always avoid napping on the couch watching TV. There's no reason for it. It's not great. It absolutely disrupts what we talked about last week when we talked about autonomic nervous system and signals and stimulation. But we want to avoid that. We also want to be deliberate that when we wake up from a nap, to make sure that we can replenish the adenosine to get that sleep pressure to go to bed, we also want to make sure that we're waking up from naps, again, 7 or 8 hours before we try to go to bed that night, right? We talked about the late naps, how that's disruptive. We've talked about those experiences where you wake up late and then you're not able to fall asleep again. Again, if you do take a nap, you want to wake up 8 hours or more before you go to bed again that day. So if you take a nap on the weekends, don't take a nap late on the Saturday, take a nap early Saturday, right? Or whatever. And then finally, the third thing, we want to increase activity. I always stress with my clients, we want to increase NEPA, non-exercise physical activity. That's going for a walk, that's taking steps, that's doing more chores around the home, that's doing hobbies that are not Netflix, right? If you go join a bowling league, like that's at least some sort of activity, picking up the ball, throwing it down the lane, right? If you, even crocheting and knitting, right? You're moving your arms. That's much more active than sitting on the couch watching Netflix and then accidentally taking a nap and losing your adenosine, right? We want to try to be active. And that might involve some workouts during the week as well. We want to do some exercise activity as well to get a little bit more of that adenosine sleep pressure. And when you can manage your sleep pressure, the body's urge to fall asleep, we can help overcome minor cases of insomnia. We pair that with last week's talk about the autonomic nervous system, and now you're doing really great things for your body's sleep systems that will allow you to fall asleep easier, sleep deeper, and get better quality sleep. And if all in all these helped you sleep better, helped you overcome some sleep issues, then I encourage you to be a fellow health rebel and share this podcast with somebody that it helps. If you're watching on Apple or something that has some review thing, leave a review. I'd appreciate it. And it helps the podcast grow. It helps spread this message of anti-fitness so that people can get healthy habits that are realistic and really stick. And that was the last hill I'm going to be walking up today. So no more huffing and puffing. Y'all have a great day, and I will catch you next week. Until then, have a great time. Break some of those fitness standards and just feel your best. That's all I want from you.